Some thoughts that I have on grammar and style. I find myself making a lot of the same edits over and over, and so try to capture some of that here that I see really consistently. This is definitely not everything, but the thing I see the most is using the correct tense. There are guides for this. I mean, so what I've done in the past is I prefer to have most stuff in present tense. I think it's just an easier way to describe things. And in fact, as you're going through and saying the model, like you have some model and the model gives you a result. The model at the time you're writing is still giving you that result, right? So it's you can make the argument that that should be in present tense. Like the model predicts that X. There are others, and there's style guides. In fact, the style guide I have here says if it's a model result you got at some point in the past, that you should use the past tense for that. I think as long as you're consistent about it, and as long as it captures some of the core ideas here, I think it's okay either way. In the past, I've edited your papers before, I've recommended present tense. I guess I could be convinced otherwise, but I prefer present tense for most stuff. So I guess, yeah, the whole graphic on the right-hand side, you can look at the tiny little link I pasted at the bottom to get to this graphic, but this is just one example of how you'd sort out whether to use past, present, future. You should really only be using past or present. In very limited cases, should you use future tense. But you can do that. You just follow the graphic here, look at your own resources. As we're writing, it might become clear that one is better than the other, and we can adjust it at that point. Okay, point 2, a really important point, is avoid passive voice. And this is tricky in academic writing because some journals will say it's better to use a passive voice, like Nature will prefer that you say, this result was obtained. I hate it when people do that because it's not clear who got that result. And sometimes it's like you're in lit review and you say this result was obtained. Well, who do you mean? Do you mean the author of the paper? Do you mean that your group did that recently? Like it's not clear. So passive voice runs the risk of unclarity. Active voice is often preferred, and you can even do things like say, we found this, right? You don't usually want to say I did. You use it like the royal we, as in the king says, we should get some more food. What he means is you should get more food. The royal we can be used, even if you're the only author on the paper. So that's possible, but you can also just rephrase things. Like we'd say, instead of the efficiency is computed to be, we'd say the performance model computes an efficiency of. So you have the subject being the model, the data, the other author or whatever, and you kind of see those examples. So if I ever see passive voice, I'll probably comment on it. This always needs a friend, and this is another case of ambiguity, avoiding that. So if you ever say like, yeah, this data shows, well, that is unclear because which is this? Is it the thing you just mentioned, or is it like the entire paper or whatever? So you always want to say like this, this data in table 2 shows that whatever. So you have to be specific about it. People, when they're writing their first papers, tend to write sentences that are backwards. And you get this like repeating pattern where you say, because this was such a way, then so on, right? Like because the data was collected, the model could be validated. When you could equally well just say the model could be validated with the collected data. Like you just flip it around so that you're not always qualifying what you're saying 5 different ways before you actually say it. That's just a really common thing that comes up. So you can write and do it in a relaxed way, but when you go back on your first edit, just look for sentences that you can flip around to make them more direct. It just makes it easier to read. Next point, mix long and short sentences. You shouldn't have your entire paper be 100-word sentences or 2-word sentences. It should be some mix. It just makes it easier to read. And then the example here is avoid sentences that have many caveats, qualifiers, lists, complex ideas, compound thoughts that, when the reader encounters it, will require a large amount of information to be carried mentally, which we know reduces comprehension and ultimately can be exhausting, right? So that's my example of what not to do. You want to say things in a straightforward way. Take breaks in your sentences. Avoid putting the reader in a situation where they have to carry along with them in their brain like 6 different things before you finally get to the point. Try to make it in a straightforward way that builds on itself. Last points are maybe obvious, but be precise. And by precise, I mean, if you say something, how could what you're saying be misinterpreted? Are you using words that are too general? Are you using words that have multiple meanings? Are you using an insufficient number of words to clearly communicate the idea that you have? So be very precise and purposeful in the words you're using, because you'll find like you get comments back from reviewers. And first of all, the reviewers may not have English as their first language. Some of us don't. And they're going to struggle. Like they're going to have a hard time knowing exactly what you mean. So you have to be very careful and purposeful in the words you're choosing. And then be concise. You can, unlike the way that I talk, I think you can probably find ways to say what you're trying to say in fewer words. So again, like write in a way that's easy for you and then go back and look for ways to condense things down. Just makes it easier. Okay, how are we doing? So we have a few more minutes. Formatting considerations. These are mostly just notes. I'll run through them quick. Different journals have different formatting requirements. So start with their template if you have a journal in mind. You're going to want to make a note of the font size and margin requirements. But not a lot of that actually matters, because in the end, the journal is going to reformat it however they want anyways. So in the manuscript stage, it's not terribly important. You could just write a Word document that has 12-point Times New Roman and just submit that. They're gonna send that out for review, get comments back, and then they'll format it how they want. But for your own purposes, if you just kind of want to see how it's going to look, do it this way. Always use a serif font like Times New Roman instead of Arial. Just makes it easier to read. In terms of the tools that you can use, there's individuals who really favor Word and think that that's the greatest thing ever, and then there's people who think LaTeX is the best thing ever. I tend to fall on the latter side for journal publications. I think LaTeX does a lot better, but I am constantly arguing with my collaborators on whether that's a good idea or not. So either way, it's probably fine. I'll have more resources for you if you use LaTeX than Word, but it doesn't really matter. Either way, what you end up with is you want to spend time learning the functionality that you need to do a good job writing in that piece of software. Automatic equation numbering. Automatic numbering is a necessity. Learn how to do that. Word is a little bit trickier than LaTeX, but either way, you should learn how to do that. What you don't want to do is waste your time updating figure numbers indefinitely. Let's see what else. In terms of like tools, citation managers are really helpful. So Mendeley is something I've used. Zotero is free, also something that I've used. There are ones you can pay for. I think the university might have some licenses for these, but like you want to have a way of organizing your citations that aren't just like keeping a list somewhere. You want to have quick references that you can pull and automatically plug them into the software if needed. We can talk more about that some other time if we want. Organizationally, so use sections. So sections are going to be the main things we've already talked about, like introduction, results, and so on. Subsections and subsection headings should be used. You should have use those to help readers quickly find parts of your document that are relevant for what they're looking at. Like, for example, you might have different parts to your methodology, like stage, 1, 2, 3, organized so that you have the subheading, so that if somebody's an expert in the field, except for the few things you did in the methodology, they can really quickly just jump to what you did and really understand it. Yeah, journal will ultimately reformat everything.
Does the journal choose what citation style you use? Like, is it usually just IEEE, or have you run across other stuff?
It really depends. So the journal will choose the citation style. A lot of the ASME journals will use the bracket number. Elsevier journals will tend to use either bracket number or author in parentheses or year, author year. It's totally dependent on the journal. So what you want to do is use a citation manager that automatically plugs into your software. So whether that's LaTeX, where you do that through the BibTeX interface, or if it's Word, you would use a plugin for Word. Because if you submit to a journal, you want to kind of match that journal. And then if it's not accepted in that journal and you want to reformat it, you don't want to go back. You just want to change the format setting and have it repopulate.
Okay.